Welcome to Purposely Peaceful. I'm your host, Jessica Rivera, a licensed marriage and family therapist and a quantum hypnosis practitioner. This podcast is where real life meets inner peace. Welcome back. This week I'm talking about what to do with worry. It's crazy that some people don't even realize that they have worries, while others, they just live in it and they don't even realize that, hey, I can do something about this. Most people have things to do, people to see, and life to manage, myself included. Last episode was about pressure. While some may work well under pressure, and I do sometimes, not always, others not only feel the pressure, but they're also swimming in worry. Some people are so used to worrying that they mistake it for responsibility or even personality. Truth is, worry is endless. Worry is rooted in anxiety, which comes from fear. And if you've had anxiety, you'll know it can go on and on and on about what could happen. What could they say? What if this? What if that? If you've ever watched Inside Out 2, then they have this really funny yet kind of real interpretation of what worry can look like. And proof enough that it goes on and on and on and on. And anxiety for the most part of my life has been the norm. If you've listened to the first few episodes, you'd know that I had no idea what anxiety was until I was 21. I thought my worry and my nervousness was part of my personality. Luckily, at some point I realized it wasn't. I remember in grad school when we were learning about the DSM, which is this big blue book of diagnoses and their criteria. I remember reading the criteria for generalized anxiety disorder. I remember telling my grad program team, you know what? I have that. I have generalized anxiety disorder. And they kind of chuckled and gave me a smile. And I'm like, no, I'm serious. But that was that. For me, it was simply a recognition of the experience that I was living. It would have been a great time to return to therapy, but I was living on borrowed time. There was no time and no funds for something like that. After all, making different life choices, I slowly had less and less anxiety. Worry was still there, but nowhere near where it was. So I felt fine, right? Years later, I'm officially a licensed marriage and family therapist, a very burnt out therapist. I had been working long hours. I knew nothing different than to carry all that I was hearing. And in therapy, there are some lighthearted moments and there are many moments of laughter, but there's also the heaviness of what people are going through, of what they're carrying, of the things that they have gone through. There's no other way to say it. It's heavy stuff. I didn't know how to process or manage my own experience of what I was hearing. What I did have was overwhelming compassion for them. But I'd find myself thinking of this client and that client. I would literally go home and keep worrying about them and what could happen. And if they were high risk, that worry would consume me. I just didn't do well with that feeling. I didn't know how to deal with it. I was stressed, I was worried, I was emotionally overloaded, not to mention that I had my own worries and stressors in my own life. And when burnout strikes and I am down for good and I need to figure it out, I had to use that time to process what the heck is happening and what do I have to do about it. I realized I cannot carry on like this. It wasn't healthy and it was robbing me of whatever peace I did have. I learned how to separate my client stuff from my own because a good therapist isn't any good if she's carrying around everyone's pain and trauma. And I'll save you from the long story of all the little lessons that I had to learn to get to this point, and I'll skip to the part of what works for me every single time. Here's a couple things to keep in mind. Although this strategy is very effective for some people, it isn't always foolproof with loved ones. It does help, but it is natural, normal, and even expected that we worry some. After all, we are human beings with feelings, we care about people, and it is only natural to have some worry. What we don't want is all-consuming worry. This exercise, what I'm about to share, this is something that I had to mentally and emotionally visualize, and now it's become quite natural. So here it goes. Imagine this. Every single time I meet with a client, typically a video call, I imagine that I create a space between me and them. a type of holding place, and I'm holding an open hug, and I'm creating this space between me and my client. And when they talk, whatever they tell me goes into this holding space. This holding space, I hold it with love, compassion, observation, and understanding, and the willingness to help. And whatever takes place during the session goes into this holding space, not onto me physically. This stuff is not going into my emotional backpack. Remember episode 4 when I talk about how we hold on to things without meaning to? So I visually imagine this. As the session concludes, I imagine myself closing the space as if it's a book that is wide open and I need to close the book and then put it away. And as I place it on my imaginary shelf, I send it off with love and all the best intentions. Then when I see them again, I pick up that book, the imaginary one, and I create the holding space again. And now for the past several years, I've done this automatically. I'm able to hold space without carrying the emotional weight of it. This visualization, you can use it with other people that are not your clients. It could be your loved ones. It could be a situation that's unfolding. So it can be used in different ways. It is a little bit like compartmentalizing. If for whatever reason I do have a trigger or I have something that comes up within me when I'm hearing someone else's story, I need to go unpack that. So that is something that I'll just make a little mental note and I will revisit later if I need to, but that doesn't typically happen very often. I'm able to walk away from this imaginary bookshelf and let it be. And I think part of learning how to do this is that sometimes we have to deal with other people's problems. It's not necessarily our own anymore. Someone has something that they're struggling with, and so they may come to you. And so it's like learning how to manage this feeling that you have when you deeply care for someone. And I know when we deal with other people's situations and we're part of it in one way or another, and we have to deal with it more directly and personally, it still works. And I think this is the thing. We can still have big feelings. And using this visualization helps us to get back to that place where we feel more at peace and where we're not directly holding on to the stress and the worry in the way that we once did. Stress can cause worry and worry can cause stress. And sure, I still stress, I still have pressure, and I still have worry. But it's how I transform what they mean that brings me peace. My stress means that I have a lot to do and not enough minutes to do it all. What a blessing. I have pressure because I'm challenging myself to expand my comfort zone, to prepare to level up. That might be a little scary, but you know what? That's an amazing thing. And I still have worries because I want everything to work out well. And what I'm trying to say with my worry is that it's coming from a good place. And knowing that about myself and what I'm experiencing, that brings me peace. It brings me a sense of comfort to know that I'm worrying because I care. Then I work on managing it. So if you ever find yourself with overwhelming worry and it's disrupting your peace, try to create a holding space for when it's on your mind or when you're interacting with somebody. And then shortly thereafter, you close the holding space and you put it back on your bookshelf until it's on your mind again. And the more you do this, the closer you'll get to making it automatic and a natural part of your emotional response system. Caring deeply doesn't mean that we carry everything. I hope you found something helpful here today. Thank you so much for listening. Catch you in the next one.